Welcome back, everyone. It is your favorite podcast. It's A&B Talk Sports Media. We are back with another episode. It's actually going to be quite a few episodes that you can binge watch, binge listen to, whichever you choose for this week 0, leading into week 1 next week when we finally have some real teams play. So just going to give you a little bit of a rundown. This episode, we're going to have our preview of the SEC and the ACC. Next episode will be the Big 10, Big 12. Final episode will be the G5, where we just talk about who we think could represent the G5. We'll also talk about Notre Dame in that one, and we'll give our college football playoff predictions. And we will also do a small week 1 preview or week 0 preview, since there's only about a handful of games that actually matter. So kicking us off with the conference that produced the two of us, the conference that produces greatness. It hasn't won it hasn't won or even played for a national championship since 2022 when Georgia went back to back, but it's still the best conference in college football. So we will talk about champion, who we think is going to play in the championship game, surprise team, disappointing team, who might be fired during the season for a head coach, best player, not player of the year, because that'll go to quarterback, best player and breakout player. So Ben, kick us off. Who will play in Atlanta in early December for the SEC title?
Well, I have an exciting answer. The Georgia Bulldogs. Surprise, surprise. They are going to be a very good team again this year. They're basically always in the SEC championship game. Not really going to mess up anything there. I think that they're an easy pick, and it's for a good reason. They have a returning quarterback who's solid, can make some special plays. When he's locked in, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He's proven that in big moments and big games. Thinking of Tennessee last year and how awesome he was against the Ole Miss defense last year in that first game in the playoffs. He was really good.
Kept him in it.
So I think with Stockton as quarterback, and then the defense should get older, should improve. I can see them in there. And then I have Ole Miss making the championship game as well. I think a lot of people, I've seen projections from anywhere from 9-3 to 10-2. I think even at 10-2 with the 9-game conference schedule, Ole Miss could win a tiebreaker there and get into that game. They don't necessarily have to be 11-1 like last year. But I think a lot of people are undervaluing Ole Miss's defense and how much it's going to step up and improve. And then also, I think there's a lot of questions on the Ole Miss offense. Where is there going to be a huge drop off? Can they maintain the explosiveness they had last year with losing all the weapons they did? And that's definitely a massive question. But when you have Chambliss coming back and you have Lacey coming back and Deuce Alexander, who's one of the most not talked about receivers coming back, who was absolutely explosive. He made the freaks list. I think he can run a ridiculously fast 100-meter, just a freak athlete overall. So I think their offense is going to be just fine, and their defense is going to be majorly improved. So I can see them making the championship game.
So I will make you happy. I do also have Ole Miss in the SEC championship game. I think Ole Miss, the biggest game for me on their schedule is not the Georgia game in Oxford, which I have them winning that game because I think Oxford, at that point in the season, you saw it a few years ago when they beat Georgia in that game in Oxford, where it was like, hey, the season's on the line. You win this game, you can possibly make the 12-team playoff. Their biggest game this season is the Florida game right after LSU, because in that Georgia game a couple of years ago, they won that game, and it was like, hey, you beat Florida, you beat Mississippi State, you don't have to play in the SEC title game, and you're going to the playoff. They lost to Florida. Jackson Dart threw like 2 or 3 picks, threw 2 picks like on back-to-back plays because one wasn't called. One was called incomplete, then he threw another one.
Yeah,
and then Florida this year comes right after the LSU game. So the emotional, which I think they'll beat LSU. So the emotionality of that game that then leads you into Florida. But I think Golding did a great job of keeping everything at keel. Now, obviously, they still had Charlie Weiss calling plays. They still had quite a few of that offensive staff that's now gone to Baton Rouge. But I think that steadiness that Golding provided that you saw in the playoff, they didn't miss a beat against Tulane. They beat Georgia, which they did not do in regular season. And then even in the game they lost in the Fiesta Bowl, I mean, Miami scored that touchdown with like less than 30 seconds left, and they still drove all the way down the field. They stayed in the game and had a chance to win it. If the refs throw a flag, who knows? They could have won that game. But in the other game, in the other team I have them playing, who I actually have winning the SEC, is a team named the Texas Longhorns. I think Texas, they have the best offense in college football. And if Arch plays the way he did they have one of the best offenses. I won't say the best, but they have one of the most
Most
talented.
talented. We'll see
Most
how
talented.
they're most talented for sure.
Most talented. You have Arch coming back for his second full season as a starter. You have Hollywood Smothers transferring in. Obviously, Cam Coleman from Auburn to go with Wingo. So they have weapons all over the field. Now, their schedule is a gauntlet. They play, obviously, Ohio State in the non-conference. They play Georgia. They play, they play Tennessee in Knoxville. First game that Arch is going to be in Knoxville. So
they play Ole Miss.
They do play Ole Miss. Yeah, they play Ole Miss. So I think Ole Miss wins the first game. Or no, Ole Miss, excuse me. I think Ole Miss loses both times. I think Ole Miss has 2 losses. I think both of them to Texas. I think Ole Miss loses the first one, and then they lose the rematch. I think Texas' one blemish will be Ohio State. I think Texas goes 9-0 in the SEC. Now, obviously, I'm putting all chips on the table by saying that, especially with a 9-game conference schedule. It's very hard to go undefeated because it's a complete gauntlet. But I do think that Texas has the firepower. Now, the defense is a big question mark, but they bring back quite a few guys. They brought some guys in. Anthony Hill Jr., I believe, is back. So there's guys on the defense that can continue to make plays. And this is a team that second half of the season was one of the best teams in college football. I mean, Mississippi State fixed them with that choke job in the fourth quarter. Because as soon as they won that game, they were just a rolling bag of chainsaws outside of the Georgia game late down the stretch. They beat Texas A&M, knocked them out of the SEC title game. They beat a couple other good teams, and then their one blemish down that stretch was to Georgia. So I think Texas is able to run the table in the SEC. Now, they might have a step here and there, but I still think that with the tiebreakers like you alluded to with the 9-game conference schedule and with still 16 teams in the conference, like, you're going to be picking apples and oranges. Like there's that one guy who the message I sent yesterday, like, is this even mathematically possible? He had like 3 teams at 8-1 and 6 teams combined where they're either 7-2 or 8-1. So with that kind of possibility with teams, with some teams playing other teams, Mississippi State playing everybody, who knows? But yes, I have Texas. So I'm guessing you have Ole Miss beating Georgia or Georgia beating Ole Miss.
That's a great question. I think I'm going to roll with Georgia just because they kind of win it every year. Just
They do. They do. And they
go with the slow and steady. They don't
yeah.
really mess up too much with that championship game, and they really place importance on it.
And they always because they're never, sometimes like they aren't the favorite. Like I think 2 years ago when Texas first year in the SEC, Texas went to the SEC championship game. Texas was the favorite, even though Georgia had smoked them at home that year, and they still ended up winning the SEC. Now we move on.
Let me just chime in on the Texas thing. I just wanted to say, I know last year we kind of talked about this, especially after weeks 2 and 3, where there were teams, aka Clemson, Penn State, that had all these returning quarterbacks that we just automatically assumed would take a step up.
I guess, yeah.
Because they were super seasoned. I wonder if we are doing that with Arch.
No, yeah.
Where we're just expecting him to take this massive leap. I will say I agree. Like the second half of the season, they were really good offensively and defensively. Like there weren't that many flaws in their game. And they definitely upgraded with Cam Coleman and the running backs. Like I think Texas being able to run the ball will be a huge deal. I mean, their lead running back, I believe, was Wisner for at least a portion of the season. And I don't even think he's winning the starting job at the team he transferred to. Yeah, so it's a huge deal that they're going to have 2 high-quality running backs that can take the load off of Arch. So, like, potentially it won't even matter if he steps up a huge deal. But just keep that in the back of your mind that there's not a guarantee Arch steps up. So potentially, if his baseline is how he played the second half of the season. That could
Right.
still be good enough, but just something to keep an eye on.
No, for sure. And I was going to get into that whenever we got in the college football playoff preview because I think there's a lot of teams who people are putting. It's like the top 7, top 8 in the AP poll. In those polls, people are saying, okay, like these 7, no matter what, they're probably going to make it. But you think back to last season where people thought there's no way Clemson missed it, no way Penn State missed it, no way LSU missed it because, like you said, they had a lot of returning talent. All the 3 of them have returning quarterbacks. And not only did all 3 of them miss the playoffs, they all 3 finished unranked. And I think Clemson finished with a losing record of like 7-6. LSU obviously around that 7-6, 8-5 with the bowl game, and then Penn State 7-6. And 2 of those teams fired their head coach. So I agree with that. Like it is. So like that's why I'm saying like it is. It's a massive leap putting them and saying that they could possibly go undefeated in the SEC. And now, could they lose a game here and there? Yes, but I do think with those 3, with Nussmeier, Aller, and Klubnik, you expected to see the growth because you had talked yourself into 3rd-year starter, 4th-year starter, 2nd-year starter, whatever.
Yeah.
You expected to see the growth. With Arch, you've at least seen a glimpse of the growth like you saw last year in that second half of the season. That's what has me feeling better about them, even though you have those 3 on the back burner to think about. But no, it is a great point. And like I was going to bring that up when we got into some teams with the playoff, because I think there's some teams who, especially in the SEC, like you have 7 or 8 teams that all expect that they're going to win 10 or 11 or 9 or 10 games. And even though even though there are 16 teams, all of them play at least each other once. Like those 7, 8, they all play each other for the most part. So it does get convoluted with that, where it's like, okay, if all these teams think they're going to win 9, 10 games, is that mathematically possible? It's not for all of them. Like some of them could, but some of them might be holding a 7-5, 8-4 bag at the end of the season when they were projected to go, when they thought they could go 11-1 and not only compete for an SEC title, but for a national title.
Yep. I will say, I think Texas's baseline talent level around Arch is way higher than Penn State,
Then those,
LSU,
because
and
I think
Clemson
all
had.
of them just expected the quarter. They were like, hey, we have the quarterback. We can just put
They need it.
subpar guys around him. They'll just elevate. But in the running game, like you said, like having Hollywood Smothers and the other transfer running back that they had, his name's escaping me. But with those guys able to, because those are guys who can take the load off of him if there's a goal line or if they're near the goal line on their own end and they're trying to make a drive instead of having to drop back pass. So now we'll get into the nitty gritty. We have surprising team, disappointing team. Let's start with surprising team. Who's your surprising team in the SEC?
I chose Mississippi State.
Aw.
I'm really high on Kamario Taylor after watching the Egg Bowl and what he was able to do in that game. And I think that Levy's always going to have talented receivers around him and a pretty good running back. They got Fluff Bothwell back, right?
Yeah, Fluff's back, and they
So
brought in some other guy.
nice. So
to
I
replace
mean, I
things.
think generally like the offense is going to be good as long as the defense
Right.
can hold their own in some games. They're going to ruin some people's seasons most likely.
Right.
They're going to be like just vintage upset central. I think they
Yeah.
upset at least 1 or 2 teams, and they should have last year. They should have beat Tennessee.
Yeah.
They very easily could have beat Texas
And then Florida, like there's 3
and
games.
Florida.
Like they're playing each of one of those games away from instead of going 5-7, going 8-4. So
And
the
their
schedule's a little
season
more.
outlook this year would look totally different. So
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's like, hey, can this team with Carmelo coming in? Hey, could this team possibly? But yeah, my team is, because I had to pick a team who wasn't playing Mississippi State, and I don't think they play Ole Miss either. Yeah. My team is Kentucky.
okay.
So Kentucky's win total, because I looked at win totals for some of this and like what
Yep.
those odds are. So Kentucky's win total is sitting at 4.5. They had like 2 cupcakes because they always play a MAC school, and then they play Youngstown State to open up the season. But now some of these games are on the road. Like they travel to South Carolina. They also play Florida and Missouri, but they host Alabama and they host LSU. And Will Staunton coming in with Minchie, the quarterback, who I believe he brought with him from Oregon. I believe he was one of the backups. So with that, or he was, where was he from?
He was at Notre Dame.
Notre Dame,
He's the
that's what it
backup
was.
to
He
CJ
was back
Carr.
when
Yeah,
that's what. Yeah, he lost he lost to CJ Carr. I feel like every quarterback league's like close to Oregon or like was sometime committed, so that's part of the deal.
for sure.
But with having with hosting Bama, especially week 2, now Bama did name Keelan Russell a starter, so there's more upside on them because they didn't go with Austin Mack, who they thought the incumbent because he was the backup last season. But they also host LSU, and I'll get to LSU in a second. But I think with Will Stein coming in, you're going to have a more firepower-ish, more exciting Kentucky offense that you haven't seen in a while. And the Kentucky of Mark Stoops that was always good. They had a decent quarterback, but they were predicated on the running game. And I think with Will Stein coming in, opening up a lot more, especially with because the receivers are gonna be put in positions to perform, and I think that leads to Kentucky, like you said with Mississippi State. I think they could beat LSU or Alabama. I think they pick off one of those two because they get Alabama early, so I don't know if it's Bama, but they get LSU late, and that'll just lead me into the next segment. My most disappointing team is LSU. I think obviously with Lane coming over, your mindset is okay. It's playoff or bust. It's playoff or bust. I keep coming back to the quarterback, and I understand that he turned Trinidad Chambliss into a guy who was a D2 overlooked player to a Heisman Trophy candidate after starting like 10 games last season. Like he finished 6th or 7th in the Heisman, I believe. So he did that, and he did what he did with Jackson Dart and all that. I get that. But Sam Levitt, if I'm not mistaken, was like their 3rd or 4th option in the portal. They wanted Sorsby, which we'll get into that in the Big 12 preview of Texas Tech. They wanted the guy from Washington who literally
Yep.
entered the portal because LSU said, hey, we'll pay you like X amount of dollars. And then
Dude,
he
it's
found
so
out,
funny.
and then
So
he
yeah,
found
Damon Williams. I was messing with some Washington fans on X. I was like, Damon's going to Kiffin, like either Ole Miss, like transferring to Ole Miss when Kiffin was still there, or LSU, because we didn't know like if Chambliss was coming back or not.
right.
I was just joking that because Kiffin had him committed to come to Ole Miss as out of high school,
Mhm.
and ended up letting him go to Arizona. Essentially, like let him, not commit, have his commit. Um, and then, like, obviously, I knew they had that prior relationship, so I was like, he might try to reach back out. And it's so funny that he literally entered the portal. But anyways,
To go
continue.
to
Sorry.
LSU, and then he ended up. I think it was like a Darian Mensah type situation, and LSU wasn't willing to pay that much, but Miami was for Mensah to get the buyout from Washington or from Duke for him. But and Sam Levitt in the 2 games that you've seen him play against, or I guess 3 games because they played Texas in the playoff. But in the 3 games you've seen him play against SEC opponents, he was helped out by a running game. Like the game last year against Mississippi State, he played terrible. He was god awful. And they had a top 10 pick in Jordan Tyson, and Kelly Jones put him on the island, and it seemed like Sam Levitt just didn't know what to do. So with seeing that week in, week out, 9 games, like we said, I just don't. I think LSU, everyone says, 10-2. I think their win total set at 8.5. I think this team could go 8-4, 7-5, especially with it being such a veteran-laden roster. Of course, they're trying to get super veterans by getting guys from the NFL, but SEC has stopped that, hopefully. But getting that just kind of mindset, if you drop a couple games early, that's why I have Kentucky possibly beating them, because who knows where they're going to be at in late October, early November, especially if they already have 2 or 3 losses on their resume.
Yep. No, I totally agree. That was an option. Since you did it, I had LSU as an option, and since you did LSU, I'll go another way. I think a disappointing team could be Alabama. I think that DeBoer consistently has kind of scraped by with close games, and that was his MO at Washington. Like,
Yeah.
there's no debate that he is good at winning close games, but I mean, at some point, the close games are going to come back to bite you. He's really just not.
Yeah.
He's not consistently like when he plays poor opponents or like less than opponents. He does not win by a convincing amount of margin,
He played
and I
like the
think
Florida
that
State
is
game last
something.
year, they played down.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's just really concerning the trajectory that they're going on. I love Keelan Russell. I think that he's going to be great for them in the future. I just think that with taking those first time starter lumps, as well as having a still lack of a run game, like you realize Ty Simpson carried them through the whole season last year, essentially to the
Right.
playoffs.
Yeah.
And the minute that Indiana prevented them from being able to throw the ball, they lost by 30. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that there are teams in the SEC that will be able to show Keelan Russell things to confuse him, and he's not quite the talented thrower just yet. I think he will potentially be in time, but as of right now, first time starter, I don't trust him in those moments where Ty Simpson was able to carry Bama. So I think
Right.
Bama could be super disappointing in that they're expected to be a playoff team again. They're expected to take another. I don't know if they're even expected to take a step, really. I think they're kind of expected to be at least the same.
I,
But I think
yeah. Yeah. I think
with the go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, like with the, I think most people have them like in that 10-2, 9-3 range, and they're just, but like they see the A, you see the script A, and you're like, okay, we got to put them near the top 12, near the top 15 in the preseason poll, but they could easily, like if you're 9-2, 9, if you're 9-3, 10-2, but you're in a lot of close games, like you said, at some point that, karma's going to rear its ugly head and you're going to lose that game. Like you're going to lose games. Like it's going to be a 6-point game in the fourth quarter and you're expected to get a first down to clinch it and you don't get it. And then the team goes on a drive to win the game.
Yeah, I think at some point, like I think they're a lock to not make the playoffs. That's how disappointing I think they could be. I think eight
Hmm.
and four is very realistic. 7-5 would definitely be not a likely scenario, but very possible. And I
Right.
think 8-4 is probably the most likely. But yeah, they should be pretty disappointing.
Well,
Do you have any midseason firings that
so I have one game. It's week 3 of the SEC, it's week 3 of the college football season. So it's first game, SEC game for both these teams. September 19th in Columbia, South Carolina. Mississippi State travels there to play South Carolina. It's the way both coaches are thought of, because think about South Carolina. South Carolina last year, like 2 years ago, they were 9-3. They were knocking on the door of the playoff, ended up not making it. They come back last year, top 15, preseason poll, and they go 4-8. Bottom kind of fell out, and you're thinking, okay, that's the bottom. But if you look at their both teams' schedule, so Mississippi State, they host UL Monroe, and then at, they host UL Monroe, and then they're at Minnesota. You lose that game to Minnesota, let's just say, because this is worst case scenario for both teams. But you lose that game, and then both of them play you have that game against South Carolina. You then have Missouri, Bama, and I believe it's LSU. If they lose all 4 of those games, if they lose all 4 of those games, that's 1-4. That's 0-3 in the SEC. That is 1-18 in not even 2.5 years as a head coach for Levy. And that is 8 and no, that's 8 and so he's 7-18 now. So that's 8-22 overall. So if that kind of, bad thing happens, it is possible that they just cut bait. Now, I don't know if they will. A lot of rumors are they won't because they don't want to pay the buyout money to then not have it for the portal the following year. But with South Carolina, they had sky high expectations last year. And if you lose that game to Mississippi State, they also play, I think it's Alabama, Missouri, and LSU. Like it's some a combination of that. So they could easily, after that, if they lose that game, they could easily start 2-4. And that's starting 2-4 off of a 4-8 season, off of a season where you almost made the playoff. So, because, and I'm also nitpicking with this one because the easy answer could be Alabama, but I think they wait till the end of the season. Because if they lose, let's say they're 9-2 or something, they lose the Iron Bowl, and that keeps them out of the playoff. And then with the rest of the SEC, half the SEC coaches are all new.
yeah.
I think there's like 5 or 6 that are new with the Kentucky, obviously with Kentucky, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, and then obviously the trade of or the switch at Ole Miss and LSU. So there's 6 or 7 SEC jobs that are new. So all those guys are going to get at least a second year unless they completely just or go 0-12. So it is a little nitpicky, but I don't know if the SEC makes a change midseason because they had so many last year. But if there is one, I'm picking the loser of that game.
Yeah, that was the two that I circled was Levy and Beamer. I think if either have a super disappointing start, they could definitely get fired midseason, but I especially don't see it for Mississippi State. I do think that, like, I have them as my surprising team, so I don't really think
Right.
that he will get fired. I just remember last year that Mississippi State fans were a little bit frustrated with how the season was going, and weren't quite seeing maybe the turnaround that they were wanting to see like right away. But I think, yeah, like you said, with South Carolina, I mean, if they have another disappointing year, Beamer's, I think, at least gone at the end of the year. Maybe not a
Yeah.
midseason firing, but if they don't
And then
make, I mean, if they don't win at least 7 games with Lenore
yeah,
Sellers and Dylan Stewart, uh, I mean,
because this is your last
uh,
guaranteed year with both of them because Sellers could enter the draft after because he's a true junior. He could enter the draft after this season. So, and he's one of the
yeah,
most talented quarterbacks that you've probably seen at South Carolina. And then all you have to show for it is one 9-3 or 9-4 or 10-3 season. Can't remember if they won the bowl game that year. The other one I think is obviously DeBoer, like you mentioned. But I think Alabama, unless they just start terrible and they're like 3-5 or 4-4 or something, and there's no hope. I think
yeah.
Alabama, if they switch from him, it's at the end of the season.
Yeah, the only thing I don't think Bama can fire him. I think it would have to be a voluntary, like him leaving for another job. If like
Yeah,
USC were to open, like Lincoln Riley has a disappointing year,
right.
USC opens, maybe he goes back over
Yeah,
there.
and they're more
But I
like,
don't
hey,
think because they gave him,
don't you want to return to the West Coast? Like, don't you want to go back?
please USC offer him the job.
Yeah.
I mean, I think because they just announced, I think in April they announced a huge contract extension for DeBoer. So I don't really
Yeah.
think it's possible for them to do that.
Well, the state of Louisiana is broke, and they paid Brian Kelly's buyout and Lane Kiffin's buyout from Ole Miss. So, I mean, in college football, they'll find the money somewhere. They won't find the money to fix the state, but you'll find the money to fix your college football team.
Unfortunately, I don't think Bama has quite as deep pockets as LSU. So, and even LSU's
Probably right.
pockets are running a little thin. But
The running low with all these lawsuits and judges. So now let's get into some happiness with this conference before we go to the ACC. Player of the year. Now, again, we're saying best player. We're not saying guy who's going to win SEC Offensive Player of the Year because that more than likely will go to one of the quarterbacks, whether it's um, Stockton at Georgia, Chambliss, unless one of us picked Chambliss, or Manning at Texas. It'll probably go to one of the quarterbacks. But who's your Player of the Year in the SEC?
I think the most dominant edge rusher this year will be Suntarine Perkins from Ole Miss, and that's who I'm choosing as the best player. I
Okay.
think so. 2 years ago, he had 10.5 sacks. Him and Princely Amon both had a huge breakout seasons. This past year, he was kind of relegated more to. It's similar to how Harold Perkins at LSU was
Okay.
going trajectory wise, where Harold Perkins had that awesome freshman year, had a bunch of sacks, got moved to linebacker because that was kind of his future in the NFL.
Hmm.
So that same thing happened to Suntarine Perkins. And then this year he's being moved back to the edge and primarily will be an edge pass rusher. And I think that he's going to absolutely go crazy. I mean, he was a high school running back, had like 300 yards rushing in the state championship game, on top of being an absolute dominant edge rusher, having like 10 sacks as a freshman. So, uh, yeah, I don't see any way in which with Suntarine Perkins as an edge rusher, he's not an absolute game wrecker and
Hmm.
probably the best player in the SEC.
So my Ole Miss alum would probably be mad at me because if we had a graphic, it would show I had Ole Miss in the SEC championship game. I had Levy possibly getting fired, and now I have an Ole Miss player winning Player of the Year. My pick is he was one of the best running backs last year in the SEC. He's going to be with the situation with Ahmad Hardy. He's going to, I think, he's going to lead the SEC in rushing by, I believe, a wide margin. My pick is Keywan Lacey. You talk about Perkins. Having a defense like that does allow you to not just drop back pass. And with Lacey and Chambliss both still there, I think a lot of eyes, a lot of preseason hype has been about Chambliss, and rightfully so. Guy came out of nowhere and took this team to one play away from playing for a national title. But with this team, I think it's going to go as far as Keywan Lacey can possibly take them when you talk about the nitty gritty of the SEC with a long season. So I think Keywan Lacey could easily go for 1,800 yards, and he's my pick to win SEC Player of the Year. Now, I will make my Mississippi State fans happy. My breakout player is he was the breakout player of the offseason. He was a breakout at the Manning camp. He was a breakout player in the 2 games he started, even though we lost both of them. It's Kamario Taylor. We're going to go as I said, Lacey's going to take Ole Miss as far as he takes them. We are literally going to go as far as Kamario Taylor takes us. Now, wear and tear is probably going to end up wearing down by halfway. But number one, you see the ball, you see the height. He's everything you want in a quarterback in this day and age. You've seen him, compared to RG3, Vince Young, all that stuff. They will be compared to Kamario Taylor by the end of this season. Again, now, how will it play out? Will it play out in wins? I don't know, but I do think it's going to play out in exciting games, and I think he will keep us in games. And you talked about when you said, hopefully the defense can make some plays. They do have Zach Arnett back, who is the head coach, and DC, who's the head coach that took over after Mike Leach passed away. And with that, I think the defense will keep them in games, whereas last year and the last few years they haven't. But my breakout player is K1 Kamario Taylor.
I agree. Absolute slam dunk breakout player of the year. He's going to be awesome. As long as he stays healthy, there's
and people look at his stats. So he played in 10 games last year. As long as he stays healthy, and if he doesn't stay healthy, God help us all. So that is our SEC preview. Again, we each have Ole Miss in the SEC championship game. Ben has them losing to Georgia. I have them losing to Texas. And you'll see in the playoff preview who we have from the SEC making the college football playoff. But we're gonna jump now into the ACC. You just want to say on the count of 3 who we have winning the ACC?
Sure.
1, 2, 3. Miami. Yeah.
One team lead
last year. One team lead. Now, granted, last year it was we probably would have said the same thing, and they lose to SMU and to who else they lose to? Georgia, or not Georgia Tech, Louisville. But I think Miami, just everyone they're bringing back. Bring back Mark Fletcher. You bring back Malachi Tony. You bring in a quarterback who probably fits their scheme a little bit better than Beck. He has an arm, but he also has the ability to get out of it. To get out of the rush. But that defense, I know they lost Harold Bain and who's the other guy? First round pick.
Mesidor.
I knew he had a crazy last name.
Hakeem Mesidor.
I get they lost those 2 guys, but I just
Ruben Bain.
They had Ruben Bain and Mesidor. I get they lost those guys, but I think there's offense alone. Now granted, I just like offense, but you talked about it with Texas. But with the other thing with Texas that we mentioned, they have a gauntlet. Miami, on the other hand, they don't really have, in a 17-team league, sometimes you get lucky and you play the bottom portion of the conference for most of the season. So their toughest game, it's not even a conference game. Their toughest game is Notre Dame. And if I had to pick their toughest conference game, I'd probably say it's maybe when you go to Clemson, but the other teams who are projected to, compete with you on top of the ACC, it's, you talk about Louisville, you talk about SMU, and that's really it. But like the other teams, you don't play them. But I have them winning the ACC championship game, and I have them winning against Louisville. I think Louisville could easily be a team. Week 1's big, but I think Louisville could easily be a team that is. That Louisville, I think, is ACC's best shot at getting 2 teams in, whether that's going 10-2 or upsetting Miami in the ACC championship game. Louisville, I think, is ACC's best shot of having a second team. but I still think they lose to Miami in the ACC title game. Who do you have Miami beating?
Yeah, I would agree on the Louisville points. I think that, especially if they can add an Ole Miss win in the first week to their resume, that's huge that would be huge for them in their playoff conversation. And then obviously if they were to somehow upset Miami in the conference championship game, they'd easily be a playoff team. So,
Yeah.
but I have them beating NC State. I just think the ACC is so who the heck knows that
Yeah.
with as awesome and dynamic as a quarterback of CJ Bailey, like can't really go wrong with choosing one of the best quarterbacks in the conference to lead his team when the
Big
conference is
game
just
week
like
0. It's a
who
conference game.
knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think something on the Miami point that I thought about, and I just want to bring it up just so we don't just all Miami praise. Uh, there's been a lot of hype and praise about Mensa and how awesome of a fit he is with the offense and how he fits the offense better than Beck and how it could be similar to how Cam Ward fit with the offense a little bit more. And he's like a mix of Beck and Ward where he's like can fit within the offense, but also operate on the run and do some crazy, awesome wow plays. I just want to point out and remind everyone that Mensa was on like a 7-5 Duke team last year, and they
Right.
barely
Yeah.
made the conference championship game on basically a technicality that one of the games they played didn't count as a conference game. And so I just want to remind everyone that he has not won big before, and
Yeah.
there's no guarantee just because he's on this awesome team and he's a super dynamic player that it guarantees success. And just because they paid a bunch of money that it guarantees success. Um, did they bring Cooper Barcade over as receiver to help the transition? Yes. Do they still have Malachi Tony? Yes. Is that enough? It should be, but I just want to, and they still have um,
Mark
Chris
Fletcher.
Paul's always going to have a really good offensive line. They have Fletcher still. So I think that there's really no concern, but there's also the possibility that similar to all these guys last year, Drew Aller, Nussmeier, um, Klubnik, that they don't take the steps that everyone expects,
Right.
where
No, yeah.
you kind of just expect that Mensa will grow with the team, but it's not a guarantee. So just want to
Right.
remind everyone that when you don't put your whole life savings on Miami
Right.
because
No,
there's a chance that it
yeah. And another
doesn't
thing
work
with
out.
that, with Mensa, I think that last year, like he has to not do what he did last year in terms of last year. I feel like there was a lot of games where he threw bad picks because he was like, I have to do everything. And now you did mention the receiver, Cooper Barcade, that they brought over with him from Duke, and you pair him with a Malachi Tony. It's like he has to, I think, remember, like, hey, just throw the dump off to Malachi Tony, throw the dump off to Mark Fletcher, and just watch them do work. Don't worry about which 3rd and 12. I have to fit this ball into a tight window. I have to do this. Like I have to force it because that's where all the talent that we talked about that he has, it's talent that he didn't have at Duke. But that is part of the reason why they went 7-5 was he felt as if he had to do too much. And if he continues to have that mindset, that could be a thing where it's kind of like with Beckett. It's kind of like with Beck at Louisville, or excuse me, Beck against Louisville at Miami last year. He threw 3 picks that were absolutely god awful, and it's kind because he was pressing so much on himself. So it's hard to say from a guy who's sitting on his couch at 29 years old, but it is something that, if you don't manage, you're going to do. You're going to make that mistake because you think you have the mindset of I have to be the one that makes the play because I don't have any talent around me. You have one of the most talented rosters in the country and by far the most talented roster in the ACC. Just dance with the ones that are with you. Don't just feel like you have to dance by yourself. Moving on now, surprising team. I have a team who, thank goodness we weren't as popular as we'll be this season last year, but if they go back and they watch it, I had a complete brain fart where I completely forgot that this team's quarterback tore his Achilles the week before. I believe he's back, but even if not, I have Syracuse. This is a team that a couple years ago won 10 games under Fran Brown's first year. Last year, of course, the Angeli injury, it kind of falls apart. Their win total,
Yeah.
like Kentucky, is set at 4.5. They don't play Miami. And when I was looking for a surprising team, I was looking at a team who did not play Miami in the regular season. And looking at their schedule, it was like they do travel to Pitt, but they host Cal, they they host Louisville, they host SNU, they host Clemson, and mind you, and then they have like 2 bye games where they're playing no-name teams. So and they play Boston College. Like, this is a team that I think could easily win 7 or 8 games if the quarterback situation. Now, granted, in this day and age of college football, you're not going to have tremendous depth anywhere. You're one injury away from going 3-9, especially if it's to a key player. So, but if they can somehow weather the storm better than they did last year, I think Syracuse could end up surprising some people. And kind of like you said with Mississippi State, like I said, they play SMU, they play Virginia, who people do forget. Virginia did play in the ACC championship game last year. They did win 10, 11 games. But Syracuse, like Mississippi State with you, could be a team that keeps teams. They don't get to the ACC championship game, but they keep teams from playing in the ACC championship game. Like, that's what they did in Fran Brown's first year. They played Miami at the end of the season. Miami was winning in not only to the conference championship game, but winning in, and you're probably in the playoff. Instead, they lose that game to Syracuse, and they're out of both.
Yeah, I can see the Syracuse take. I can see that. I mean, Angeli was definitely really good when he was healthy, so having him back is huge. And Fran Brown's done nothing but be surprising and a good coach, so I could definitely see that. My surprising team is Georgia Tech. I think they're super overlooked right now. They lost their OC. They lost their presumed starting quarterback to Florida. They have a lot of new, and obviously Haynes King is not there anymore. Uh, Here's the thing, though. Brett Key is still a good coach, and
Right. Yeah.
he's not just gonna let Georgia Tech fall off if he has anything to say about it. And I think he does have something to say about it. So I trust him as a coach. I trust that Justice Haynes is going to be awesome this year. I think.
And I think Fernando Mendoza, I think his brother's the new starting quarterback there.
Yep, Alberto
Alberto.
Mendoza. Yep. Oh, when Kurt Signetti was asked if he lost any players that he wanted to keep, he said Alberto Mendoza. So I mean, that's high praise. I think that Georgia Tech's going to be right in the thick of things, just like they always are, and I think they're being heavily overlooked. So I think it's going to be surprising to people that they're still around and that they're still in the conversation when it comes to who's potentially in that championship game at the end of the year.
And I wonder if they're somewhat being overlooked because they were a lot of people's pick. Of course, last year, if you looked at the ACC, everyone had their 2 popular picks. It was Clemson and it was Miami. Now, obviously, Miami still made a run to a national championship game, and Clemson completely fell off. But a sleeper last year was Georgia Tech. And I think that's what people and then they ended up, I think, going 7-5, 8-4, something like that. And that's why I think where some people are like, this year, because they do lose, like you said, they lost Haynes King, but they do bring back Justice Haynes. They have Alberto. And like you said with Brent Key, he's always going to have them in the game. Like, they're not going to be completely blown out. And if they do lose a game here and there, they're not going to just fall apart
Yeah, I mean it's a
down the stretch.
stylistic thing.
Yeah.
They play tough football. They don't really play flashy football, so it's not necessarily exciting. But with Haynes King last year, it's like, oh, there's a reason to choose them. I think now with
Yeah.
so much new, there's not necessarily a reason to
Reason to choose them.
get excited. Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. Disappointing team in the ACC.
I have Virginia just simply because I don't think that they're going to repeat what they did last year, having
Yeah.
that kind of out of nowhere awesome season. So I think it's going to be a letdown year.
Yeah. My team is, if you look at a lot of people, they have them as a team that can compete. I mentioned them earlier when we were talking about teams that could compete to possibly play in Miami. I have SMU. I think Now they open the season against Florida State. We'll get to them in a second, but you have to travel to Louisville. You play Virginia. I talked about they travel to Syracuse. You play Wake Forest. I think it's gonna be a little bit better this year. Same thing with Cal. Now, granted, Cal that is a halfway across the country trip, but I think there's so much. It's almost like we keep saying with teams last year. Like we all bought into Clemson, LSU, Penn State because we expected this growth. I mean, Kevin Jennings is his third full year as the starter, and you're expecting, okay, he's going to make a massive leap. They're going to get back to the team that won 11 games and made the college football playoff 2 years ago when they got boat raced by Penn State. But it's like, are they? Because they had, like, he took us, like, he had a great season that year, but then he took a step back last season. So we're just expecting, oh, he's going to take a massive leap forward again and be back more to that freshman, sophomore season of him. I have SMU. I think their win total again. That's where I looked at because you got to see where Vegas has these teams finishing. Their win total was 8.5. I have them going 8-4, possibly 7-5, because like I mentioned, those tough games they have. Because Florida State, I mean, what did Florida State do last year? They were preparing all season. They prepared all season to play Alabama, and they beat Alabama. I mean, you go traveling to Doak Campbell Stadium. That's probably their biggest game of the season, and then who knows after that? And then they play Notre Dame to finish out the year. So I think SMU is a team that has a lot of preseason possible expectations, but I just don't know if they meet them.
I would agree. I think Kevin Jennings definitely fits in that category that everyone's expecting to take a step up, and we haven't seen it so far. So I think teams have kind of figured him out. He's still dynamic, but I think teams can game plan around that.
All right, coach who will be fired midseason.
I don't have anyone that I think that's going to happen to this year, really.
Norvell.
No,
I
I
have
can
Mike
see
Norvell.
it. I can see it. I just everything I've heard is just like they don't want to pay the buyout. They don't care about football
Right.
anymore. So I don't know. That's my only hesitation. That's the obvious answer, and he definitely should be realistically. Although they're
Right.
not giving him any money to make a good team, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, but the thing with them though is it's like Sam Pittman last year at Arkansas. Like Sam Pittman played 2 tomato cans the first game. Now, granted, he was the first SEC coach fired still, but they played 2 tomato cans at the beginning of the season. And you thought, okay, 2-0, that's going to buy him some time. They open up against some tomato can week 0, then they play SMU. So if you start 2-0, but then you go to Bryant Denny, that's probably 2-1. But then you host Central Arkansas, that's probably 3-1. So it's like, okay, what does the record have to be? Does it have to be a blowout loss, or does it have to just be you're starting out 3-5? Because you look at the schedule, it is manageable for him to make it through the season. But then it does come down to, okay, do they make the if they fall off, do they make the change, or do they wait till the end of the season? Because again, a lot of coaches might get fired, but a
Yeah,
lot of coaches can also make it through the season and then they end up, resigning so so the school doesn't have to pay them all the money. Player of the year in the ACC.
Malachi Tony.
I have Mark Fletcher. Kind of like with Keywan Lacey, I think so many teams are going to be prepared to defend the pass with Malachi Tony and with the receiver whose name I said earlier that they brought over from Duke with Mensa, and with obviously Darian Mensa. I think so much because the thing with Mark Fletcher, he was somewhat talked about in circles, but he really broke out in the playoff. So I think that's the major key with him is if he's able just to add on to what he did in the playoff and kind of fly under the radar, I think he could easily end up rushing for 1,300 yards in the ACC. My breakout player is the guy who I think will lose to Darian Benson in the ACC title game. I have Lincoln Kienholz. Kienholz from Louisville was a 3-year backup at Ohio State, appeared in some games. And Jeff Brom just has this knack of bringing in guys who maybe were overlooked, were given up on, where, you had Tyler Shuck a few years ago, you had Miller Moss last year, and then they end up producing very well above what their expectations were. And now, obviously, Keenholz, a lot of expectations are now being raised about him because of that. But I think he's able to weather the storm, and again, the schedule pops up nice for him.
I have Justice Haynes as my breakout player. I think he's going to have an absolutely dominant year. So I mean, I, it's hard to say breakout player because everyone kind of knows about him, but he
Right.
really hasn't had a full dominant season, and I think this
Yeah.
year's the year for that. I will
Well, it's like
also
the
just
same.
kind of go back.
It's like the same thing with Carmario. Like people know who he is, but then
Yeah,
it's like, okay, he's actually able to produce because, like with Justice Haynes' case, he kind of had to share the spotlight in the backfield with his quarterback the last few years, especially last season with Haynes King. So now that he is the guy on a team that will probably win 8 or 9 games, and you can look up there in November and they're 7-2 and they're competing for an ACC title. Who knows where that could lead them?
yep. And I just wanted to go back and say I said Malachi Tony for best player, but if NC State, if like I predict, if NC State goes to
Yeah,
the conference championship, CJ Bailey is the best player
CJ
in the
Bailey.
ACC.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that were to.
All right. So again, that is our SEC ACC preview. We will talk about again all the teams who we project from these conferences will make the playoff in our playoff prediction, and then the next episode will be our Big 10, Big 12 preview. So be on the lookout for that.
See you then.